Last session, we discussed how MCP, while extremely useful for external integration to databases or tools, are also causing context bloat. And skills, with their elegant progressive disclosure concept, avoid the context bloat altogether. And then we also said that perhaps the way forward is to find a middle point that keeps the goodness of MCP along with skills. And this is where we introduce the concept of Kiro Powers. Now, if you have never worked with Kiro before, it's the cloud native agentic IDE from AWS, and it's designed with the concept of specification-driven development. Kiro has several cool features, but today we focus mainly on the skills, MCP, and Kiro Powers. What we'll do is pretty simple. We'll start with zero context, right? No specialized knowledge provided either in terms of skill or MCP or powers. In absence of any specialized knowledge, Kiro will do an exploratory search, reach out to internet, and basically narrow it down to specific capabilities of Strands and agent code before it starts. We'll build our way slowly, starting from no context to context provided in form of skills, and we'll see what is the impact of this on the overall context. And then we'll also look at quality of output in response to the prompt. Quality of output is a bit subjective, but the objective assessment of how the context bloat happens in case of skills versus MCP versus power is something that we'll be absolutely able to see. So let's start. I open a session and let's look at the context usage. So conversation 0, okay, we haven't asked anything and Kiro has not responded. In terms of MCP tool, there's 1%, and this 1% contribution is coming from the fetch tool, and this fetch tool is contributing to the 1% of MCP tool. And steering file shows 0 will ask build an agent. So Kiro has the task of building an agent using Strand framework and deploying it to agent core. And as expected, it reaches out to do web search. The point that we wanted to look is already there. So there's no specialized knowledge provided to Kiro, both for Strands and agent core, and therefore it defaulted to doing a web search. Okay, so now we move on to adding skills. Adding skill is quite straightforward. Under agent steering skills, I click on this plus section. So let's move to skills. And you can import skills from your folder, but you can also reach out to GitHub. So I'll import skills from GitHub. I'll provide a GitHub URL, press enter, and now it's searching, and you see Strands agent skills have been added. Now, the other skill I want to add is agent core. So I'll repeat the same steps. I go back, select global agent skills, and I want to import skill from GitHub. I have the link to GitHub URL, and now I have provided it, and both agent code and Strand skills feature. Now let's check how the context has moved. So conversation 3%, and this is basically from the prompt I provided and the response Kiro gave back to me. MCP tool still at 1%, totally fine. Steering file still showing at 0. Now this is something you should watch out for, because we added skills for both agent core and Strands, and they have contributed virtually nothing to the context usage. So in terms of context usage impact, zilch. In terms of quality of output, do we do better than doing a web search? Same prompt. And as you can see, it's activating both relevant skills. So this is fine. Kiro was able to understand that I have access to Strands and agent core skills, and these two skills are relevant to the prompt that I have provided. So it reaches out to skills, and then subsequently it will go down in the documentation that these two skills make available, and then it will do its thing. Now let's look at the context usage. Steering file 0%, this is good. This is where the skills documentation is getting indexed, so it's fine. MCP tool 1%. MCP tool 1%, keep an eye on it. Next up, we're gonna add MCP servers of Strands and agent core and remove the skills, and then provide the same prompt and see, number one, how the context usage changes, and number two, how the quality of output changes. Okay, so we go back to skills that we had added, and I'll very quickly remove these two skills one after another. Now both the skills have been removed, and we need to add the Strands MCP server. Let's find out the configuration of the MCP servers. So I go back to my Kiro MCP server section, and I look at the MCP JSON. This is where the whole MCP server configuration is provided, and then I look for Strands agent. So Strands agent have been added. If I save, Strands agent has been added now, but I also want to add the agent core. Therefore, I'll also pick the agent core MCP server and let me add it over here and save. And now I have access to both Strands agent and Bedrock agent core MCP servers. So you see, MCP tool, it moved from 1% to 2%. So context usage has already increased even before I have put in any prompt relevant to these two MCP servers. That's the downside of MCP server we spoke about in previous session, and that's something you see now in action. And now we are interested in seeing how the response to this prompt will change. Now Kiro is calling MCP tools, Strands agent and Bedrock agent core. I would trust, then cancel, just to show you that the relevant capabilities have been invoked to get access to the Strands agent documentation, also the Bedrock agent core MCP documentation using these MCP servers. So now I'll remove the Strands agent and MCP server configuration of agent core, and these two are now gone. Then once I save, you see both these MCP servers are not to be seen, and MCP tool context usage dropped from 2% to 1% straight away. Coming to the last part, now we want to add powers. With the same prompt, we'll see, number one, how the context usage has changed. Ideally, it shouldn't. That's the promise of powers. And then, is the prompt able to activate Kiro Powers dynamically? We don't have any power installed, but very soon we will. And if you scroll down, let's look for Strands agent, and I'll try to install it. And you see there's an MCP configuration linked to the Strands power. And similarly, I'm going to install the Bedrock agent core powers. And as I'm doing it, you can also see there's a MCP configuration linked with the Bedrock agent core powers. Okay, so let's go back. We have these two powers installed. We have these two powers shown under MCP server. But even though these two powers show up under MCP server, if you go to the MCP2 configuration and its contribution to the context usage, we are still at 1% as against 2% previously. Now let's look at how it impacts the Kiro's response to the same old prompt, building an agent using Strand framework. And as you see in the response, Kiro is activating both powers and it's fetching the official docs to get the exact deployment pattern. Now I have stopped it in between because this is exactly what I wanted to show. I hope you like this, and I'll see you in the next video.